rice feeds more than half the world's population, with Asia accounting for 90% of global production and consumption. But here's the problem. Traditional paddy fields are a major source of methane, a greenhouse gas that's far more potent than carbon dioxide. So the search is on for a way to grow rice that's better for the planet and doesn't hurt farmers' livelihoods. I'm Arnold Gay, and in this CNA Correspondent podcast, we go on a journey with Saifulbahri Ismail to Java, Indonesia. That's where Singapore Research Institute has managed to help farmers grow rice with just half the emissions. Saiful, good to see you. So I think we need to start with a bit of context, a bit of science
Okay.
101. Okay, so why is rice production such a stubborn climate problem?
Well, hello, Arnold. Rice production is a stubborn climate problem because it's both a major contributor to global warming and a critical staple for half the world's population. Now, unlike other grains, traditional rice cultivation creates a wicked problem where increasing production to ensure food security inevitably increases greenhouse gas emissions, specifically methane, as you mentioned. So, how does rice emit methane? Now, we often see rice grown in flooded fields. Now, it's such a familiar image that it almost feels essential to the crop, but rice doesn't actually need to grow in water. In fact, farmers flood their fields mainly as a way to protect the crop. Now, so why keep the fields underwater? The biggest reason is weeds. Now, most weeds can't survive in water. They simply don't have the ability to breathe underwater. And that matters because rice is what farmers call a weak competitor. It grows more slowly than many other plants. So, without protection, weeds can quickly take over, competing for sunlight, nutrients, and water. Now, left unchecked, they can overwhelm the crop and, in severe cases, wiped out an entire harvest. And flooding also creates a natural barrier that keeps those weeds at bay. It also helps deal with pests. Many insects that damage crops struggle to survive in waterlogged
Hmm.
conditions. So, by flooding the fields, farmers can disrupt their life cycles and reduce the risk of infestation. Now, there are other benefits too. The layer of water acts like a buffer, protecting the soil from extreme heat and helping to keep temperatures more stable around the roots. It also helps the soil retain moisture, which is especially
Mhm.
important in hot climates like in Indonesia. And in some cases, flooding can make nutrients in the soil more accessible to the rice plants, reducing the need for additional fertilizers. The water
Right.
even helps prevent soil erosion by keeping the top layer of soil in place. So, from a farming perspective, flooding makes a lot of sense, right? It's a simple, effective way to protect the yields, but there's a trade off. Because once the fields are flooded, oxygen can no longer reach the soil, and that changes what happens underground. In these low oxygen conditions, microbes break down organic matter, and a byproduct of that is methane, a potent greenhouse gas. Now, what makes rice unique is how that methane escapes. Some of it rises as bubbles, slowly making its way through the water and into the air, but a large portion travels through the rice plants themselves. The plants have tissues that act as chimneys, allowing the methane to move from the soil through the roots and stems and out into the atmosphere. So while flooded fields help farmers grow rice more efficiently, they also turn those same fields into a steady source of methane emissions. It's a hidden trade off, one that has gone
Wow.
largely unnoticed for decades,
Yeah.
and one that scientists are now trying to change.
I'm fascinated to hear that they act like chimneys and actually allow the methane gas to
That's right.
escape into the atmosphere. I'm curious, when you arrive at the trial location, I believe it's a village called Jatilor, what were your first impressions? Did it look like a, typical rice farm, or did you feel that it was different immediately?
Well, Arnold, the trial site is in Jatilor village in Grobogan Regency in central Java. I visited the area in late April, traveling with scientists from Temasek Life Sciences Laboratory, or TLL. It's about a 2 hour drive from Semarang, the provincial capital. Now, as we approached the site, now what greeted us was an endless patchwork of green stretching all the way to the horizon. Rice fields laid out in neat geometric patterns. Now, we were filming also using a drone, and from above, the rice fields would look like a giant quilt, each plot a slightly different shade of green, reflecting different stages of growth. Now, the trial itself spans nearly 100 hectares. That's roughly the size of 250 football fields. Now, Indonesia was chosen as one of the trial sites because it's one of the world's largest rice producers and a significant source of agricultural emissions. Now, TLL also has a long standing history in the region, including a partnership that began after the 2004 tsunami. This includes the successful Aceh Rice Project, which helped develop more resilient rice varieties for the region. Now, for the Decarbonizing Rice Project, the first planting season began in September 2025 and wrapped up in February this year. Now, the project is into its second cycle with more results expected by the end of the year. But what stood out across these fields were not just the rice plants, Arnold. Scattered throughout the paddies were clear acrylic chambers. At first glance, they look almost out of place, but these are essential to the research. They are used to measure methane emissions from the fields. Now, each chamber seals off a small section of the paddy, trapping gases as they rise from the soil and the plants. At regular intervals, researchers extract air samples using a syringe through a small pot in the chamber, and those samples are then stored in vials and sent to a laboratory for analysis.
Saiful, I want to ask you about the cuts in emissions now. 50% is an incredible number. So, how exactly do they do it?
Well, Arnold, at the heart of this project are three key strategies, each one designed to cut emissions while helping farmers grow better crops. Now, the first is water management. How you water a rice field has a big impact, not just on yields, but on methane emissions as well. Traditionally, rice fields are kept flooded, but in this project, scientists are changing that. Now, one method is called the alternate wetting and drying, or AWD. This method is used in the various trial sites, not only in Indonesia, but also in India and Laos. Now, instead of keeping the field constantly submerged, farmers allow the water level to drop at certain stages of the plant's growth. To do that, they use a simple tool, a perforated plastic tube placed into the ground. It lets them monitor the water level below the surface. When it falls to about 15 centimeters, the field is flooded again. Now, this cycle reduces the time soil stays waterlogged, cutting methane emissions in the process. Now, another method being tested, which is much more expensive, is drip irrigation. Now, this delivers water directly to the roots in precise amounts using sensors. That's why it's expensive. So instead of flooding the entire field, the plant gets exactly what it needs, no more and no less. Now, the second focus is the soil, because healthy soil means healthier plants. Scientists are studying the microbes that live in the soil. Now, these are tiny organisms that can influence how well rice grows. Based on this, researchers at TLL have developed a customized fertilizer blend. It's tailored to the local soil conditions, helping to improve nutrient uptake while reducing the need for excess fertilizer. Now, the third and final strategy is the rice itself. Scientists are working to develop and adapt rice varieties that can thrive with less water and under tougher conditions. That includes identifying genes that allow rice to grow well outside of constantly flooded environments. Now, one of the varieties used in this project is known as Temasek rice, which I'm told is sold in supermarkets in Singapore, like NTUC. Now, it's developed using advanced genomic breeding techniques. Scientists identify specific DNA markers linked to desirable traits such as drought tolerance, flood resilience, and disease
Mhm.
resistance. They then select and cultivate plants that naturally carry those traits. The result is a rice variety designed not just for productivity, but also for sustainability. Now, Dr. Ramachandran Srinivasan is a senior principal investigator at Temasek Life Sciences Laboratory.
We got around methane reduction of up to 50%. We have a three-pronged approach. One approach is that change the irrigation methodology, like AWD, which is alternate wetting and drying. And also we have our own fertilizer cocktail, which we developed, a scientifically based and then nature-driven fertilizer cocktail we have. We use that. And also we have varieties to test as well, because genetics matter. So all these things put together, the results were positive, and we could increase the yield of the farmers by 6%, even though it was flooding.
Now, together, these three approaches, water, soil, and seed, form the foundation of the Decarbonizing Rice Project, a system designed to reduce emissions without compromising on yield.
Saiful, I'll be honest, even to me, this sounds very high tech. So, how did the farmers react to it? When they were first told about the idea, the approaches. I mean, how were they? I guess they would have to be encouraged, right? What was done?
And you're absolutely right, Arnold. One of the biggest challenges in this project isn't the science. It's getting farmers on board. Now, at the start, many were reluctant to take part. No, for generations, they've grown rice the same way, right? By flooding their fields. So when they hear that water levels will be reduced, their immediate concern is simple. Will this affect their harvest? Now, their worry is understandable. Farmers know their land. They've worked it for years, sometimes decades. So when scientists come in with new ideas, there's naturally some doubt. Now, to many farmers, researchers are seen as people dressed in white lab coats who work in laboratories, not in the fields, right? And that creates a gap. Now, bridging that gap took time. Scientists from TLL, along with their local partners, had to spend time on the ground, talking to farmers, listening to their concerns, explaining step by step how the new methods would work, and most importantly, why they wouldn't reduce yields. In fact, the goal is the opposite, to increase them. Now, researchers were confident because they had already tested the approach on a smaller scale. Now, in Wonogiri Regency, also in Central Java, a pilot trial on just 3 hectares showed promising results. Yields went up. That early success helped build confidence that the same methods could work on a much larger scale. But beyond the science, there were also practical incentives. Farmers in the programs were provided with rice seedlings, fertilizers, and pesticides at no cost, free of charge. That reduced the financial risk of trying something new. And for many, it made the decision to participate a little easier. The project also introduced farmers to more modern farming techniques. For example, using drones to spray pesticides, something many had never seen before. It was a glimpse into how technology could change the way rice is grown. Now, Kasno is one of 172 farmers in Jatilor village who participated in the project.
Awal-awal kita menghadapi
In
banyak
the
petani,
beginning, we were
di sini
dealing
kan
with
banyak
many
yang
farmers here.
tradisional.
Most of them are
Awal-awal
quite
kita
traditional. At
ya
first,
ada
there was
yang
some
menentang,
resistance.
takutnya
They were
tidak
worried
ada
that projects such as
proyek-proyek
this
di masa
might not
ini
succeed
tidak
or could
berhasil
lead to crop
ataupun
failure.
gagal.
But
Dengan
after we
aktifnya
explained the
kita
methods and how
jelaskan
everything would be
perlakuannya
done,
ini
the
macam
farmers gradually began
itu,
to accept
sehingga
it.
petani bisa menerima.
Now, over time, attitudes began to shift. What started as hesitation slowly turned into curiosity and then acceptance. Because for farmers, the most convincing argument isn't theory, it's results.
Mhm. So, from what you saw, Saiful, you spoke to Kasno, obviously, you spoke to other farmers in the village as well. Did you notice, the technology, the advances actually changing their lives? I mean, what was the broader reception like from the farmers?
Right. I would say that this new agricultural method has the potential to change the lives of farmers like Kasno. Now, for him, the benefits are clear. Before joining the project, he typically harvested between 6 to 7 tons of rice per hectare. And now, after adopting these methods, his yields have increased to around 8 to 9 tons. Now, that's a significant jump. But it's not just about producing more, it's also about earning more. Casno says his profits have gone up by about 30%. And for farmers, that makes all the difference because at the end of the day, any new method has to work not just for the environment, but for their livelihoods too.
So is it your sense, Saiful, that they will stick to this? I mean, or do you think at some point they will just eventually go back to their methane heavy traditional rice farming?
Well, Arnold, my sense is that farmers may still need to be given incentives for them to stick to this approach. Now, earlier I mentioned that farmers in the program were provided with free rice seedlings,
Hmm.
fertilizers, and pesticides. Now, the program will end at some point, right? And these incentives will stop. And when they end, farmers will have to decide, do they continue with these methods or return to the way they've always farmed, like you mentioned? Much will depend on what they've seen so far. Now, if the higher yields and increased profits continue, that could be enough to convince them. Now, that's certainly what scientists at TLL are hoping for, that once farmers experience the benefits for themselves, the shift won't just be temporary but lasting. Now, in addition, project partners are also developing a verification system to turn methane reductions into carbon credits, which acts as a new revenue stream for farmers.
All right. So eventually it's going to be the profit margins that will make the difference. Saiful, this was
Absolutely.
also, yeah, so this was also a fairly small trial. You mentioned 100 hectares, and I was reading that in Java alone, there are 3 million hectares of land that are being used to farm rice. So what next? Is there a plan to expand these trials and introduce it, to other areas, broader areas of Java and other areas of Indonesia as well?
Certainly, Arnold, the project is now in its second planting season with results expected by the end of this year. Now, that will help determine the next steps because the real goal is much bigger. The next phase, scaling up adoption across Asia, is not only Indonesia, but across Asia, is targeted to begin in 2027. And the ambition is clear. Within 2 years, project partners aim to produce 50,000 tons of low methane rice across the region. Now, to put that into perspective, that would require around 16,000 hectares of farmland. And you mentioned earlier that Indonesia has 3 million, so 16,000 hectares is just very small.
A drop in the bucket, really.
That's right.
Yeah.
But if, in the context of this project, that's a significant expansion from where the project is today. But even then, it's just the beginning. In the longer term, the target is far more ambitious: 1 million tons of low carbon rice by 2032. Now, scientists at TLL believe this is achievable, but only if the project can move beyond research. And that means partnerships, strong partnerships between scientists, governments, private companies, and most importantly, the farmers. Because scaling up isn't just about growing more rice, it's about changing how rice is grown. Now, across thousands of smallholder farms, many of which have relied on traditional methods for generations, there are also economic challenges to overcome. For farmers to adopt these practices at scale, they need to see clear benefits, not just in yields, but in income. That's where carbon markets could play a role. Developing systems that reward farmers for reducing emissions through carbon credits could be key to making this model sustainable in the long run. And then there's the supply chain. Producing low methane rice at scale is one thing, getting it to the market is another. It will require coordination across the entire system, from farmers and millers to distributors, retailers, and finally the consumers. Because in the end, success won't just be measured in tons produced, but in whether both producers and consumers are willing to be part of that shift. Now, Dr. Sheetal Sharma is the head of carbon projects at RISE.
We have a very deep operational presence in Indonesia. We're already working with a lot of farmer networks across Java. We already have the farmers who are onboarded with us and to whom we can scale. Just to give you a ballpark number, this season we are already will be doing around 16,000 hectares with the farmers on AWT technology itself. We can easily produce 50,000 tons low carbon rice, which can implement these technologies and can produce sustainable rice.
Now, Arnold, behind this project is a significant financial push. So far, about 5 million US dollars in philanthropic funding has been mobilized by the Philanthropy Asia Alliance, drawing support from its network of partners, and they're looking forward to, getting more funds for this project.
So, Saiful, on that note, you were earlier talking about a complete ecosystem that has to be in place, researchers, sponsors, you have to have the infrastructure in place as well. So I'm wondering, about the transferability, if you like, of this particular project to other parts of the region. You talked about it very briefly, but I'm thinking more about countries like Thailand, Vietnam, the Philippines. You mentioned India. Um, is it going to be easy, for these practices to be adopted? And I guess the thing that we haven't really addressed yet is also whether this is going to pass the taste test, maybe the most important factor of all.
You're right, Arnold.
Mhm.
Definitely. First of all, this project has plans to be spread to more countries in Asia. Because if the project wants to achieve its 1 million tons of low carbon rice by 2032, it has to find more land, right? And more countries to produce the rice. Vietnam, Thailand, Philippines could be potential countries that this project can expand. But ultimately, the real test of this project isn't in the lab or even in the fields. As you mentioned, it's in the market. Because no matter how successful the science is, low methane rice will only make a difference if people actually buy it. And that's where the challenge begins. There is growing interest, of course, in sustainable food. Consumers are increasingly aware of climate change, and many say they want environmentally friendly options. But when it comes to buying rice, the reality can be different. Price still matters a lot. Now, low methane rice often looks the same as conventional rice. I'm being told it also tastes the same, to answer your question. Rice tastes rice, right?
I
so,
haven't I
so
haven't seen it yet, but I'm willing to try it for sure.
unless that rice is cooked in brani or nasi lemak, then it tastes different. Right. So for many of these consumers, Arnold, there's little reason
Mhm.
to switch, especially if it costs more. And right now, it usually does. Producing low methane rice isn't just about changing how rice is grown, it also involves proving that emissions have actually been reduced. Now, that process, known as measurement, reporting, and verification, or MRV, can be costly. Scientists and researchers have to measure methane levels in the field, collect samples, analyze data, verify results. Now, all of that takes time, specialized equipment, and resources. On top of that, farmers may face higher operational costs when adopting new methods. So, when the rice finally reaches the market, it often comes with a premium. In many cases, that premium can range from about 10 to 50% more. To put that into perspective, in Indonesia, medium grade rice typically sells for around 15,000 rupiah per kilogram. That's about 90 US cents. Premium conventional rice can go up to about 19,000 rupiah per kilogram. Now, low methane rice would need to compete within and not too far above this range to attract mass market consumers. That's why affordability is key. Because while demand for sustainable rice is growing in countries like Indonesia, India, and Laos, actual purchasing decisions are still driven largely by price. Now, Arnold, there's also another factor, awareness. Many consumers still don't fully understand what low methane rice means or why it matters. And without that understanding, it's harder to justify paying more for it. So, for this project to truly succeed, it's not just about reducing emissions in the field, it's about building a market, one where consumers see the value, where prices are competitive, and where sustainable rice becomes not the exception, but the norm.
Saiful, thank you very much.
Thank you, Arnold, for having me.
I'm Arnold Gay. We hope you enjoyed watching and listening to this CNA Correspondent podcast. It was brought to you by Tiffany Ang, Nat Petalvero, Zikri Ayman, and Craig Dale. We'll see you next time.